Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first panel of the GNOSIS conference. I think you'll all agree that so far the presentations we've had have been absolutely superb and provided us with a lot of food for thought, particularly on the question of space debris. This afternoon's panel is a panel of 6 participants discussing examples of successful collaboration in the SSA arena. So over the next hour, you're going to hear from an excellent panel on some of the collaborative projects they've participated in, focusing specifically on SSA, and maybe in some instances where we, the UK, may have missed out on some potential good opportunities. What I'll do is I'll introduce each panelist individually and allow them time to speak in their specific field. Some may even have some slides, and then we'll take questions from everybody at the end of the session. Collaboration is a very significant part of SSA, as stated over a decade ago. It's an expensive, essential arena in which to work in, but due to the enormity of what's required, one can say collaboration is key. And at a military SSA conference back in 2014, I actually presented on that subject. So although we hear about the significant seas of space, the congestion and potential, I think collaboration should be high on that agenda. First, I'd like to introduce you to Professor Chris Newman, a professor of space law from Northumbria University, a great friend and colleague of mine. I've had the pleasure of working with him since, probably in fact, since I left the RAF, so he's always known me without the uniform. I can honestly say that Chris has single-handedly increased an interest in space law in an order of magnitude, both across the Northeast and I would say at least nationally, if not further. And he is a leading light in space in the Northeast. Chris, over to you to talk about collaboration.
Dinz, you are far too generous. Thank you so much for a lovely introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, can I just say how really pleased I am to be here at the GNOSIS conference. It's such a great gathering. We're all going to really develop and learn stuff here, because this is an area that I think, especially in terms of collaboration, whereas Dinz says we really can learn, we really can develop, and we really can hopefully expand our knowledge. I'm here. I'm gonna be very brief because there are far more interesting people than I ready to talk. But I'm going to cover three broad areas. Firstly, I'm going to sort of explain how I, as an academic, view collaboration with the space industry, the type of things I'm looking for, the type of things I think you probably need to know if you're going to get involved collaborating with an academic. Then I'm going to talk broadly about the type of work that I've been engaged in collaboratively. Dinz is going to figure an awful lot. And I'm going to tie it in specifically to a project that I'm very proud to be engaged in called the Space Law Games, and how that's grown and developed over time. Hopefully, I'll give you a flavor of the types of collaboration that we can have, and also the value of specialists. That's going to be sort of my final conclusion is going to be a little advert for myself, but it's also going to be an advert for non-technical specialists across the piece, you know, economists, political scientists, lawyers, legal theorists, and how they can contribute to a project where you might think there's absolutely no sort of role for them. But starting off with, I want to say that in academia, certainly I speak for myself, but I know I speak for my colleagues as well. Collaboration is absolutely what we're about. It's kind of fundamental to our job. I couldn't do the job I do without the input of the people from the space industry, without input from government, without input from the military. All of this is part of the pie, because the traditional sort of image of the academic in the ivory tower crafting papers that only other academics will read, that's long dead. There is no academic I know that can simply sit and lock themselves away for 3 or 4 months, a weighty tome that they can unleash on a poor, unsuspecting world. We need liaisons, we need interaction, and we need to be sort of in collaboration and working together on projects. Universities, one of the big myths that I sometimes see is universities have money. We don't have very much money in terms of, you know, investing in research. What we do is we've got access to pots of money that we can apply for. So a sort of a warning sign that I'd flag up right now is, if you are thinking about collaborating with an academic within the university, they won't quite have the dynamism, and they won't quite have that agility that maybe a private company will have. There will be a process that we'll need to go through. For every application, for every funding bid I go through, I need to get sign off from the faculty, sign off from my head of department, just to make sure that I'm not getting in too deep. So the first thing I'll say is kind of attenuate your expectations in terms of responsiveness. We do try and kind of speed things up. One of the things that I'm noted for is my last minute emails to my finance team. They always, I assume, give this big sigh when they see my name crop up, because they know I'm going to be asking for things yesterday. Also, what I'll say is we all need to think about collaboration and how that role can very easily slip from being collaborator to customer. And it's something, it's a warning sign that I've seen a number of projects. It's a warning sign that I would flag up as well. Universities, what we're looking for is impact. If you've been in academia, or if you're if you know an academic, or you are an academic, you recognize that thing, impact. We're looking for to be able to demonstrate real world impact or real world effect of our research. So kind of the product we're looking for at the end of it is for you as a collaborator. Newman made a difference to my project. Having him on my side made a difference. There was something he added that we wouldn't have done before. Yes, we're looking for academic papers, and we'll probably try and draw people in to do that. But we're also aware that, an academic paper isn't the ultimate product. We're looking for reports. We're looking to really disseminate our work in a way that we never used to before. And that kind of brings me on to my collaboration with Dinz and with the wider SSA network in terms of the space law games. There was, up until we left the European Union, a pot of European development, European regional development funding available for industry and academic collaborative PhDs. Myself and Dinz applied for this to look at the notion and the way in which space law has evolved in terms of fault for on-orbit operations, and what that actually means. And one of the great things that we've discovered in having this collaboration is that the time and space to have interesting academic discussions, but also to shift the focus of the collaboration. When we started, it was very much on the legal terms of a fault liability, what all that means. But actually, we've now drifted, and the project, our PhD student and me and Dinz, we're all sort of in a big learning circle where we're finding out that actually we're not looking at the legal terms. We're very much looking at the evidential terms and what we can prove and what we can show. So one of the benefits I would say for myself, and I hope Dinz will echo this, is this virtuous circle of learning and understanding and the collaboration generating new knowledge that we never even anticipated. And that's what I would say is I think the biggest benefit of collaboration. It generates new knowledge. It also allows, industry to access academia, to access this huge pool of research and this resource that otherwise would lay untapped. So if you're thinking about doing a project, if you're thinking about looking at SSA, my advice and my sort of humble request would be think about bringing on specialists from other disciplines. If you're talking about SSA, if you're talking about, so for example, developing a space traffic management regime, really useful to have people who understand regulatory theory, what actually that means, and what's been tried already, what works, what doesn't work. There's a temptation to think that can be left to one side, but actually the regulation, the theory behind the practice is what's going to make it tick and what's going to make it work. So if you're thinking about social scientists, legal academics, political theorists, we're actually relatively cheap. We don't need labs. We don't need expensive equipment. We'll need buying out for our time. We might need a little bit of travel budget, but actually we're relatively cheap. And I think the value that we add to a project, the conclusion of which might be we need a new treaty, but some would say, do we really? Or can we do it another way? Can we explore other ways of working? So those are my three sort of take-home messages, that universities are hungry for collaboration. We don't have money, but we can certainly access the pots, and I think we make attractive funding partners if you're looking to access funding pots. Secondly, that in my own experience of collaborating with Dinz, my understanding, and I hope that the understanding I've contributed to the community, has expanded on a dramatic basis. And thirdly, please consider non-technical specialists, because I think we have a role to play. And I think as space activity develops and as the social questions and the economic questions start getting folded into funding bids and into government requirements, I think we can provide some real value for money. Dinz, I hope that is what you were after, and I hope that was of use.
Chris, thank you very much. That's exactly what we were looking for. Thank you. That's brilliant. And I'd like to echo it, that point. I think you made some significant points there, particularly that collaboration delivers impact. And significantly, as we've discovered, if it's cross-disciplinary collaboration, that impact is greater. Thank you very much. Moving on very rapidly to our next presenter, I'd now like to introduce Mr. Jacob Geer, who is the head of space surveillance and tracking for the UK Space Agency. Jake has been the lead for the UK's national activity on SSA, SST, I should say more specifically, and to combat space debris now since July 2019. Sorry, Jake, and you're younger than me as well. It's an age thing. And he leads an ever-expanding team of specialists dedicated in supporting both UK safety of flight needs, regulatory needs, and supporting the UK space industry. So, Jake, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Dinz. Thank you for that kind introduction, and what a pleasure to be speaking to many of you today. This is a great conference to be at, and this is a great time, I think, to be interested in space sustainability, space surveillance and tracking, SST, my main area of interest, and generally how we make sure the orbital environment stays usable for the future. It's getting real political attention. It's getting real political attention here in the UK, over in the US and Europe. The UN is really paying attention to this and issuing new guidelines. There's a bit of a momentum building up within the sector, I think, to really look at our social responsibility and safe and how we protect this environment we depend on, and how indeed we continue providing the services to the public that we all depend on, the mapping, the banking, whatever it may be that you use satellites for. I think trying to raise awareness amongst the public about how ubiquitous satellites are is really powerful, and therefore what we need to do collectively to protect satellites and protect space, to let us carry on using it in future. That's a personal interest of mine. I'm here today to talk about collaboration between the civil SST program and elsewhere. So forgive me for those not into space acronyms. SST is space surveillance and tracking. So typically that's a network of radar, telescopes, and potentially lasers that will, from the ground, perhaps now in space as well, that will be used to monitor and track debris and satellites in orbit, and then warn of collisions, re-entries, explosions in orbit so that we can take action. I've got a team of 16 people, 6 of which are specialists, Chris, you'll be pleased to hear, who are from Dinz's company, as it just so happens, who are deep into the astrodynamics of how to do this. But I also have people that look at the program management, the policy or international implications, as well as looking at the digital programs that we have to actually enable this information to be used. So it's a real effort for government at the moment, and it's a real effort for a lot of other people. I wanted just to explain the words civil in my civil SST collaboration title. We, UK Space Agency, for civilian reasons, want to look after space, to protect our economic interest there, to protect the environment for future generations, to make sure we can carry on doing science and exploration. But there is also a military program, and I'm really pleased that a close colleague of mine, Rayna Owens, is here to talk to you about that in future. Me and Rayna speak very often for my sins, and so she's the other half of this particular program from the government's perspective. Thinking now about our types of collaboration. I've drafted this slide to show some of the various different ways we interact, and I'll go around this wheel in a second. I did try and obviously utilize an orbit diagram because hey, we're here talking about space. So in the middle is my program, the Civil SST program. And I've listed here a few of those different collaboration routes we have. So starting from the top, academia. So as well as the other areas I'll touch upon in a second, we already have linked the research councils. So particularly STFC, who operate the Chilbolton radar and do some other work for us, and also the Natural Environment Research Council, or NERC, who operate a sensor in Sussex, so the Hurst Minnow facility, which has some laser and geodesy facilities. So we already tie in with those elements of academia. Over the last year, we've so far collaborated with, and by collaborated with I mean given money to, 5 universities, and we're looking to do more of that this year coming up through some of our calls, so I expect that number to increase. And things like this GNOSIS group and this conference is a real, for me, barometer of just how strong the academic sector is and how much interest there is. I know that Warwick University opened their SSA Centre, the SDA, Space Domain Awareness Centre, either today or yesterday, another great indicator of just how much the academic sector is pushing on, part of our collaboration. Moving around to the right-hand side, industry. So I've put up here a few logos. You may spot your company in there, you may not. These are space companies generally, with a few more generalists as well. So whatever we do in government as a policy team or a public office, we need support from industry. And actually industry have some key skills, some key ability to do things quickly, on time and on budget that we really value. And so we either reach out and contract with them to deliver key services, so software, analysis, sensors, but we also provide research and development funding to support new developments that in 5, 10, 20 years time, we could be using to monitor space and warn of issues there. So that R&D pipeline, that innovation ecosystem, if I can use that word, is really important to us to make sure it is primed with the right funding, but also the right direction, so that industry know what we're thinking as a public agency. I've got a little question mark there on my industry side, which is for 2 new logos that I'll soon be able to add. So these are sensor providers that we're planning to put new contracts out to. So they'll go on to this slide to signify the fact that we're now getting data from industry. And that's important, because fusing the academic data, the industry data, our own national sensors together is not an easy task. Bringing those different data sources and combining them for meaningful effect can be really tricky. And so actually that's a lot of our focus now, making sure we get the best out of this vast amount of data we're now getting in from radars and telescopes across the world. Moving to the bottom, our cross-government collaboration. The key player that we interact with is the Mod Space Command, so that logo in the bottom left. Space Command has been formally stood up for some time, and Rayna can speak to that more when she speaks. But actually, I can't overplay how important that civil and military collaboration is, because really it enables us to be more than the sum of our parts and doing either program alone. We have staff who work within, as part of and in support of the Space Operations Centre, or the SPOC. So lots of nations have a Space Operations Centre, their own individual SPOCs. R1 is based in an RAF base, and actually the strength there is the fact, again, we have guys in hoodies and t-shirts, so my team working alongside guys or girls in uniform as well. And that actually means that we can really have that collaboration across disciplines and able to support each other's different roles. I don't want to miss out my colleagues in Dstl. I could have added the Foreign Office logo here. We work quite closely with both of those departments. Dstl in particular provide us some excellent technical advice, which we're grateful of. I think Will Feline will speak to you shortly. Finally, on the left-hand side, international collaboration. So here are a few of our international partners. The European Union logo is still there. It's still there. It is smaller than the other logos now. It used to be bigger. So we used to have a key program with the European Union to conduct SST, so conduct our tracking as a group. Now that we've left the European Union, the access that we have to those services will end shortly. And actually, that's why we're doing more as a nation to stand up our national capability. As well as the EU, we also have a really close link with ESA. ESA are fantastic. They have an amazing operations centre, which I'm quite jealous of, I have to say, in Darmstadt in Germany, having fantastic feeds from across various different sensors from all their spacecraft that enables them to really monitor the space environment. They've got a space safety programme, which the UK is the largest contributor to, which is helping us ensure that space is both safe and sustainable now in the future, and that's a really key part of our ongoing collaboration. Moving down, you can see the UK-US flags there, and so our bilateral collaboration, particularly with the US, is vital, and I've involved in discussions with the Department of Commerce in the US, as well as supporting the defence-to-defence conversations when needed. That link, that bilateral relationship we have, and the fact that we now want to share some more of the burden and provide our own products and data to the US is, I think, vital. Then finally, the G7, so the group of 7 nations who met in Cornwall in June, we had a political statement drafted on the importance of space sustainability. So alongside the pandemic, alongside major international issues, alongside the things which affect the whole world, there is also a statement about how important sustainability of space is to everyone. That doesn't sound like much, but actually it's not easy to do in policy or diplomatic terms to get 7 nations to agree that something so important, we have our leaders put their names to it. And that really sets the tone, I think, for showing to various different governments that we're serious about space sustainability. So that was my slide. I'm now going to spend a quick couple of minutes just speaking about some other issues and some other collaboration opportunities. So if the team would kindly take the slide down, you can look at me now, unfortunately. I wanted to flag that there are some upcoming opportunities or some ongoing opportunities. So we have collaborated with the Space Agency's National Space Technology Programme to really try and prime that innovation pipeline I talked about by offering new grants or support to projects which are perhaps a bit further from market, so lower technology readiness level. That is an ongoing call. We had a really strong response to that, and actually we're now going through the evaluation phase. But that's one way I would expect to see that number of academics and that number of industry bodies shooting up, because we're companies and universities to develop new knowledge and new capabilities in the future. We also have our more focused debris removal work. So we want to look at a national mission to remove debris from space, not just to monitor and track it, but to go up to orbit and remove some UK debris from space. And we're again going through a process now where we're hoping to be able to talk about some of the teams that are going to look at that for us. We're in the early phases, we're studying the feasibility, but actually that again shows the UK's real interest here and how much we're placing importance on sustainability of orbit. And finally, I just wanted to flag as well my thanks to the GNOSIS network, so Sir Catherine Courtney as chair, but also people like Don Polarco and Stuart Eves for really helping to push this up the political agenda. So again, I know that's not easy and takes lots of phone calls and meetings at conferences and papers, but I think it's having an effect. And that's really great for me to both be able to show to people there's something going on here, but also I think to drive this up the agenda so people ask questions about why we're doing more, and then we can start to design programs like mine to really make sure we are doing something about orbital congestion, safety and security. That was all from me. I think back to you, Dinz. Thank you.
Jake, thank you very much. That's a great presentation, and it's so good to see how much collaboration. I mean, even if your team is growing, it's just amazing how many international and national collaborations you've either formed or part of or maintaining, which is really good to see. One thing I might try and pick up with the questions, if there isn't time at the end, and just to drop the seed in your mind there, is overclassification of space data. But we'll see if that might pop up from somebody else later. But Jake, thank you very much for that presentation. Now, space situational awareness is made up of 3 significant areas: information or intelligence, space surveillance and tracking, which the UK Space Agency have a fantastic handle on, and of course there is what's known as the space environment or space weather. And now joining us, we have Mark Gibbs from the head of space weather at the Met Office. Mark formed the Met Office Space Weather Programme back in 2011, following the inclusion of space weather in the 2011 National Risk Register, and it's good to see that it remains as a significant part of our National Risk Register. And he's led the programme since that time, creating what we lovingly call the MOSWOC, or the Met Office Space Weather Operations Centre, which is only one of 3 globally staffed 24/7 centres staffed by experts for space weather forecasting. Hopefully they'll do better than some of your friends that come on TV to give us the day-to-day weather forecasting, because I was hoping for rain today so that sitting in the office with all this sunshine didn't feel so painful. Anyway, I detract slightly. Mark, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. And yeah, we had the rain this morning here, so you were perhaps unlucky if you missed it. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Yeah, I have the pleasure of have been responsible for space weather at the Met Office, and as you see the image on the left there, that is sort of how we look at the sun, which is very different to that just sort of quite blank blob we just sort of see there in the sky. During some of the time, it's been missing for parts this summer, I realise. And on the right is a schematic from ESA just showing some of the impacts we're worried about with space weather. And notice, towards the top of that image, just a number of them which are within the space sector. So it's, the space sector is very important to us. So what I plan to do was just talk through a few successful collaborations we've had, covering both international collaboration with users and also with the science community, which will probably pick up on what Chris was talking about at in our first talk. So as Dinz has already said, back in 2011, space weather went on the UK's National Risk Register. The UK had no capability for predicting space weather. So I was responsible for creating what is now the Met Office Space Weather Operations Centre, MOSWOC, and creating that capability. And that really all came about through collaboration. The US operated the two other global centres, which are manned, staffed 24/7 by experts. So really, we working with our US partners, the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Centre, we essentially lifted and shifted capability from the US and brought it into the UK. Without that collaboration, which had been building for a couple of years, it would have taken us a long time to actually stand up that capability. And we managed to stand it up as a 24/7 capability in 2014. So that really was from a standing start. That collaboration has continued and expanded. Oh, there we go. So we still have operational collaboration on a day-to-day basis with our US partners, NOSWIPSI, but also bringing into the fold now is the United States Air Force 557th Weather Wing, also has a spacewalk. So our forecasters are on a daily basis speaking to each other and comparing notes. Essentially, so for the global space weather enterprise, we can produce the best possible forecast that is out there. And we're all working off a limited number of assets in terms of monitoring assets, a very small number of forecast models. So that collaboration really is key, so we can share our knowledge and expertise, produce the best possible forecast on any one day. Moving into the user domain, and we've had a really beneficial collaboration with the military Skynet team operated by Airbus. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, so obviously some of these images have been liberated from our colleagues at Airbus. Just gives you an idea of the coverage of the current Airbus constellation, providing secure satellite communications for the military and for government operations. Skynet have a very low threshold to risk, and therefore looking to make sure they are constantly mitigating any risk, and space weather was clearly on their radar. So we worked with them really in a multi-year collaboration. This is probably 3 or 4 years in the making, working with them, trying to understand the vulnerabilities their spacecraft and the space-based services have to space weather. Once we've done those, we then worked with them to both identify mitigation scenarios and exercise them. And through that, a lot of two-way trust was built up, and that really is key when we're looking at collaborations. And as a result of that, we developed a bespoke alerting service for them, and then we went back and we've exercised that service and the response. And we've exercised it not just between ourselves, but also in some of the big exercises like the prelims to Global Thunder, working with the US, and that's been really effective collaboration. And just continuing the story, back in September 2017, we had a succession of hurricanes running through and into the Caribbean and into the southeast of the US. There are a number of military resources deployed to the area as part of Op Newman, and at the same time, we had the largest space weather event for a decade. That image, which has just popped up, shows the degradation of HF communications that was occurring during some of these important space weather events. And that clearly meant that the satellite communications the Skynet team were providing were critical to the operations out there, because other methods like high frequency communications, HF radio, were not going to be suitable for much of the time. As I said, as part of the process that we'd gone through in terms of understanding their risk and how to mitigate it, we developed some specific products for them. Here's a couple of examples. And we worked really closely with them through that, what was really a week-long period, where we were once or twice a day briefing into Skynet's own sort of incident meetings to make sure they were completely abreast of the space weather scenario, and they could really minimize the operational risk to the all-important communication services they were providing to the military who'd been deployed to the area. So that's just a good example of both a collaboration that developed in peacetime to develop something which we could use when the going got tough. And we've actually, although it wasn't a major event, we've actually managed to utilize it in a real event and just see how it works. And that still is an ongoing collaboration. And finally, talking about academia and scientific collaboration. Space weather is very much like terrestrial weather. I don't know how many generations it will be before we can say we've understood the weather, or we've understood space weather, and we've really mastered being able to forecast it. Dinz talked about some of our shortcomings in forecasting terrestrial weather. So actually collaborating with the scientific community is really key to try and drive forward those new capabilities, those new models, the new monitoring techniques. And we work very closely with Ralph Space, part of STFC, and with a group of NERC institutes to basically put together a joint bid to the UKRI Strategic Priorities Fund, and we were successful in securing a £20 million programme to essentially develop space weather capability. That project is, I suppose, approaching about the halfway point. It's a 4-year project. We're approaching 2 years into that project. In actual fact, there's a big swimmer colloquium going on at the moment where people are sharing information. So there's a good example where we worked very closely with academia, and we identified what was a mutual benefit to the two of us. And actually, as Chris was saying, academia doesn't have the money, but together we can go and make the case to win the money. And that's precisely what we did in this instance. So I'm just quickly going to put up as really my final slide, just what I see as being the ingredients of a successful collaboration. First of all, I've mentioned this several times, is mutual benefit. It's that early identification mutual benefit. If you don't identify that early, then the relationship really fizzles out before it started. So getting that early is really key. There needs to be commitment from both sides, and that's commitment to enter into a relationship for the long term, because these things don't happen quickly. Those 3 examples I've shown probably took a minimum of 2 years and probably 3 to 4 years to reach fruition. Sometimes it means you have to attend meetings which sometimes feel pointless, but they're actually important to attend those meetings just to develop a relationship and just to be seen to be supporting your partner or partners. It's also important in understanding roles. And okay, this is outside the SSA domain, but I'm also involved in the relationship with the Environment Agency, with the Flood Forecast Centre. And that has been a really fantastic operational collaboration. But that's very clearly where we have to focus on what our roles are and make sure we focus on those and develop the maximum benefit we can mutually. And I'll say it again, you have to keep citing mutual benefits all the way through. If one side feels they are not winning out of the collaboration, then it very quickly falls apart. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I look forward to questions later. Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much for your presentation. And one note I'm taking from that very much is you're adding in C to the ever-increasing Cs of SSA, and we've had congestion, contested space, competitive. We can add commercial to it, of course, collaboration is what we're talking about, and then that significant commitment, which is the most important piece. And thank you for underscoring the level of collaboration that occurs both intergovernment, internal to government, and then across the international community as well. Moving on a slightly different tack, very, very briefly, I'd really like to welcome to the space, if I may use that phrase. And talking about puns, I don't know if Mark realised he talked about space weather not being on the radar. Or was that a pun intended? But I'd now like to introduce Mr. J. Tate, who is, in my eyes, Mr. Spaceguard. SSA in the ESA definition of SSA also includes planetary defence, for want of a better phrase, includes near-Earth object tracking, not just the human objects that we've put in space, but the more natural ones. And Jay is the director of the Spaceguard Centre in Powys, excuse my pronunciation, in Wales, which is the UK's main source of information about near-Earth objects, and one can say our main contributor to planetary defence. So Jay, over to you to talk about collaboration. I think we may have a stuck internet. So whilst we establish that, or if need be, do we want to move on to another presenter and then come back to Jay if we re-establish the connection? Jay's back. Brilliant. I don't know.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's typical timing of the internet, especially in rural Wales.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you caught the introduction, Jay. I'll hand it over to you to talk about the near-Earth object collaborations anyway.
Okay, well, thanks very much, and apologies for the Welsh internet. Sadly, it falls to me to catalogue a series of historical failures in collaboration, specifically in the area of the near-Earth object hazard in the UK. Back in July 1994, after the fragments of comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 collided with Jupiter, it seemed reasonable to ask what the UK had planned should something similar face the Earth. And the answer was very soon in coming, absolutely nothing. So, thanks to the help of a lot of the shakers and movers in the field, including Gene Shoemaker himself, I was able to put together a paper for the Ministry of Defence, who were then my employers, proposing the establishment of a small centre to investigate the near-Earth object hazard. And that was submitted to government in March '96. The result, I have to say, was not very encouraging, mainly because nobody knew whose job it was. Then later in the year, an updated proposal was submitted to the Secretary of State for Defence and the Minister of Science and Technology, and that too crashed and burned for very similar reasons. However, one result of this was a series of meetings with the then British National Space Centre, where it was decided that there was a good, strong case to pursue a study into possible UK contributions in this emerging international field. A host of government, academic, and independent organisations showed up, and the unanimous conclusion was that something needed to be done, but not by us. No government department or agency was willing to take on the responsibility, very much a not my problem gov syndrome. The final meeting was held in Cambridge in July '97 and concluded with the BNSC representative stating that there was a unanimous view that something needed to be done about the near-Earth object threat, and that nothing said at any of the meetings would constitute an excuse for doing nothing. And that's precisely what happened. Nothing. Subsequent correspondence with the BNSC and the Natural Environment Research Council, I have to say, wasn't encouraging. The BNSC's response was that the government's view, and I quote, is that the scale of action taken so far is commensurate with the known level of the threat. No action, obviously no threat. The NERC response, this area is not covered by the NERC mission. The work which NERC supports focuses on extreme natural events. Unbelievable. The Ministry of Defence was advised that as the UK didn't have the capability to launch a mission to deflect an asteroid or comet, there was no requirement to investigate the issue further. It was also made clear further correspondence on the subject would not be welcome. But a spin-off of the meetings was the establishment of an organisation called Spaceguard UK, which was originally designed to encourage a credible UK near-Earth object programme. In March of '99, in the House of Commons, Lembit Opik, after some tutoring, described the threat posed by near-Earth objects and suggested that we really did need to do something about it. So in July of that year, a team from Spaceguard UK visited the Science Minister, then Lord Sainsbury, to put the case for a feasibility study into the establishment of a national Spaceguard centre. He agreed to establish a task force which, after 9 months of really quite hard work, published their report. Not only did this report validate the hazard posed by near-Earth objects, but it also made 14 substantive recommendations for action by government. To date, 1 has been actioned and then subsequently unactioned. In the meantime, Spaceguard UK established the Spaceguard Centre in mid-Wales, designed to be an information node for public, media and professionals. At the same time, the BNSC published a statement of work for a national near-Earth object information centre, in line with one of the task force recommendations. Now, as this was precisely the job that the Spaceguard Centre was designed to do, we submitted a bid in collaboration with 5 regional centres countrywide, but it failed. Mainly, I suspect, because we couldn't be relied on to comply with the gag clause in the statement of work, which read, the contractor will accept some limitations on its freedom to promote views on UK space policy, and particularly on the hazard presented by near-Earth objects. In particular, if these should be in direct contradiction of those of the government, since the government didn't have any views, but I can take the point. However, having been campaigning for this sort of action for 6 years, it was very pleasing to see the rush of institutions who were suddenly passionately interested in near-Earth objects. Clearly, government money on the table seems to encourage enthusiasm. In early 2002, Lord Sainsbury launched the National Near-Earth Object Information Centre based at the NSC in Leicester, which received quite a substantial sum to set it up. But as soon as the funding to maintain the website was stopped in 2012, the NSC shut it down. Then, with the agreement of the then new UK Space Agency, we took over that role in 2013, costing central government not a penny. But the Spaceguard Centre is not all talk, and we linked up with a number of projects who developed remote robotic telescopes around the world, giving us access to these instruments. And we also developed our own robotic asteroid tracking system. Then in 2008, the Institute of Astronomy in Cambridge decided to decommission its 24-inch Schmidt camera because of light pollution in Cambridge. It was suggested that the Spaceguard Centre might be a good new home. Although it's 15 feet high and weighs over 7.5 tons, the huge advantage of the instrument is its massive field of view. It's a perfect for an asteroid search program. However, the total lack of external funding, government or otherwise, has meant that the entire project is being funded by a small collecting box in the shop at the centre. And of course, the amazing donations of time and effort from my quite extraordinary band of volunteers. At the moment, the building's nearly complete and the camera is well on the way to becoming an extremely effective near-Earth object search instrument. In the wider world, things have moved on as well. NASA romps ahead with its programs, and ESA is now involved as part of the SSA program. And at the UN, 8T14, led by Richard Crowther, who coincidentally was the then young civil servant at the MOD, who was initially saddled with my original proposal back in '96. But AT14 is setting up an international framework to address the near-Earth object issue. In more recent times, we've been asking the UK Space Agency, the MOD, and the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy for an official contact to make sure that we are getting all of this right. In effect, if I'm getting it wrong, tell me. But so far from the UK Space Agency, no answer at all. And the MOD and DPEIS have both replied saying, ask the UK Space Agency. So in the UK, it's still a busted flush as far as the near-Earth object hazard's concerned. And after 25 years, Spaceguard UK has yet to achieve its aim. So it really is a case of stuff it, we'll do it ourselves. We're very proud of our relationships, though, with the Near-Earth Object segment of ESA's SSA program and the NASA Centre for NEO Studies. Just as a last thought, I attended the ESA NEO and Debris Detection Conference at ESOC a couple of years ago, only to be disappointed to find that 80% of the presentations were on man-made space debris. Perhaps protecting the planet isn't as financially lucrative as protecting satellites. I think I'd better stop. I'm upsetting an awful lot of people. But I would welcome any questions at the end. But if I have upset you, then I'm very sorry. But shall we say, we've been upset quite a lot as well over the last quarter of a century.
Jay, thank you very much for a sobering presentation, but a significant presentation as well. And thank you very much for all the work you've done over the past 25 years and beyond to support this this project and ideal. It takes people like you pushing against the door constantly before the realization, before the penny drops, and we should do more. So hopefully that won't be too long. But you know, today was focused on the success. I can't speak now, on the successes of SSA collaboration, and I think it's significant that we need to learn from areas where there's a lack of success and be able to focus on those areas and do well. So hopefully there are some more questions at the end, and if not, I'm sure it's generated some more and you'll get some good responses later. So thank you very much. Moving back to the satellite focus of space situational awareness, I would like to introduce our next speaker. I've had the privilege of working both with and for Group Captain Rayna Owens from UK Space Command during my 32 years in the RAF. Over the last 10 years or even longer, she has been working on a number of space issues, from being the commander of Royal Air Force Fylingdales through work at the Ministry of Defence to set the foundations for the current developments of both the Space Directorate and Space Command, and very much on SSA that the military do, but also on the extensive international and industry engagement. She's been taking an initiative and a very agile approach to capability development and delivery delivery for initially for the Royal Air Force, and since its founding in April for the UK Space Command. Group Captain Owens, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinz. I am hoping that you can all hear me. I've had to join via my phone, which is less than ideal.
We can.
That's great. I will keep it quite brief because I see the time is ticking on, and we've still got Will, who is bringing up the rear in terms of our excellent panel today. So thank you to the folk at GNOSIS for inviting me to attend and participate, and thank you, Dinz, for the kind words. I'll have a quick canter around and give you some thinking as I go, talking about collaboration and a couple of other bits on the side. So to go back to Dinz's point, we've been doing space collaboration for more than 50 years. As he mentioned, I had the privilege of being in command of RAF Fylingdales when we celebrated our 50th anniversary. But at that stage, it wasn't as much of an acknowledged thing. So space was up there, but people weren't as aware. We are all in this community very aware that it's becoming increasingly complex and complicated. And I think the more I get into it, the more it brings out that no one nation, body, individual, company, whatever can do it all alone. I wanted to link back to what Chris has said right at the start when he spoke about bringing in people from outside. That's something I've tried to do with my team to add some diversity of thinking as we cut new turf and think about how we're going to go ahead. And one of the taglines I use all the time is space is not special, but it is different. And sometimes you need that clear thinking approach. And I particularly like the way Chris has brought his forensic mind to space law. The space problem, the space domain, what's in it, what people are doing, and the challenges and risks, the challenges, hazards, threats and risks that present is truly a wicked problem. Space Command, a couple of words on that. We stood that up, and this is my 5th space job at the 1st of April. And had our official ribbon cutting ceremony in July. We are one of a series of nations that have suddenly taken that leap forward to understand why space is important. And we have now a joint command as part of the Air Force. What does that mean in normal speak? That means we have Army, Navy and Air Force officers, civilians, all engaged in the work. And we're a little unusual in that we have 3 pillars. So under a single 2-star senior, we have operations, planning, support, and we're really hoping that that means that we'll be more agile and be able to do things in a slightly different way as we move out. Our mission includes the tagline, protect and defend UK and allies' interests in space. I'm doing a good piece of work to unpack that and what it actually means, because that's great words, but I need something a bit more precise if I'm to deliver capabilities to support it. And currently our top priority is looking at space domain awareness. It may be blindingly obvious, and I think it's broader than a military context, but generally when we are working in any of the domains, of which space is one of 5, we need to really understand what's going on in that domain and what is normal and what's not normal, and what might be dangerous and what might be nefarious. And while we've been collaborating on space domain awareness for more than 50 years, while we've had a space operations centre since 2008, we're still not as good as we need to be at all of those things. So that's why that is a top priority for us. Jake has mentioned the great work we're doing together. That is, I think, but I'm biased, that the work between Jake's team and my team that we're doing to collaborate on looking at a UK National Space Operations Centre for the future is a fantastic demonstration of collaboration across government. I'm minded with working such a diverse set of people that there are 2 bits out there, possibly 3 listening to Jay's conversation before, but not more of that right now. There are threats and hazards. I think the military folk, we're pretty used to thinking about threats, less so about hazards. And I'm sure Jake would agree on the other side. Space agency colleagues are more focused on the hazards and less about the threats. The reality of the world is, if it's a bad day in space, it's a bad day in space. And if there's debris, that causes problems. It doesn't really matter how it was brought about. So in terms of unpacking how we will enhance our current Space Operations Centre and move to the future, threats and hazards is something that is right on top of my list of things to unpack. So that's a bit of contextual and scene setting, a bit of collaboration then. Well, I've been collaborating on space for a long time now, and everything that the team and I do is collaborative in nature. We've mentioned some of that cross-government collaboration already, working with the Space Agency, with BEIS as they stand up a Space Directorate, with the CAA on their new role in terms of licensing and the rest, and with the FCDO on their work of norms that they've been taking to the United Nations. That is all some fantastic work that is proliferating across government. So that's the cross-government piece. If I look internationally, we've been working something called the Combined Space Operations Initiative across a number of nations, currently 7. So Canada, Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany, UK, US. And I've been leading some of the work with the US and looking at the capability and architecture elements there. So that is a fantastic body of activity. There are other things that relate to policy and operations, which link back across to the work on norms and everything else. So there's a lot of international collaboration. Outside those 7 nations, we are talking increasingly to NATO and a range of other nations who are a little bit further behind us on that space journey. If I look across academia, then I'm sure will come on to mention the astrodynamics community of interest that Dstl has been involved in and we've very much supported. And with that and a number of science initiatives are working across academia. And then with industry, we are out and talking to industry all the time. And one great example of industry engagement was something called the International Space Pitch Day, which was an initiative we ran last year with the US. And that particular initiative sought to identify industry partners against a problem set, and 4 of the 6 problems were related to space domain awareness. That was an opportunity to try and see what I work regularly with the normal suspects in terms of industry, but that gave me an opportunity to reach out and see who else was out there that I didn't know would have value, that could have value to support our broader activity. So in a really quick round the houses, that gives you a snapshot of a long journey, starting a new chapter with the stand-up of Space Command and some great opportunities, and a significant foundation in terms of collaboration across government, internationally with academia and industry, on which we can build to get after those really wicked problems that that ISS we have to deal with when we look at the increasing congestion, and all other things in space. So I'll keep it short for now, Dinz. I hope that's okay, because I know there's more to come and time is running short.
That's great, Rayna. Thank you very much. And I personally know how much collaboration you and your team have been doing. And in fact, we could fill this hour and well beyond on all the successes that both previously Air Command and then subsequently Space Command have had. And whilst keeping on the theme of military collaboration, I would like to now hand over to Dr. Will Feline of Dstl. I've had the pleasure of working with Will a number of times over the past few years. And Will is the lead of the Dstl Space Situational Awareness team. And I'll hand over to you to talk about some of the great collaborations you've been working on, noting, of course, that your colleagues will be talking about more of them later today and tomorrow as well. I think what we might want to do is sort this out in the background, and we can move on to a couple of questions whilst we try and unfreeze Will's communications. If you can do, that'd be great. And if you leave Will on the side briefly, hopefully we'll be able to get him back in both sound and sight very, very soon. So there's been a number of questions, and we'll have just a minute or two to answer them. Unfortunately, with so many speakers, we run over the time, but there's some very important points to listen to there. But we'll bring all the rest of the panel back on now. And I will pick up on a couple of the questions quickly, and then we'll answer the rest at a later date. I think they've shuffled around to me, so I think I'll go with Dylan Reeves' question first, and that is, what upcoming collaboration opportunities are the panel excited about? And I know that we've lost Jake because he had a work commitment, and I'll open that question and pass it to Mark, if you wouldn't mind responding to that.
Yeah, okay. I think the biggest opportunity I'm excited about is about how we integrate space weather into essentially space traffic management. Pretty bluntly, when we get a big space weather event, we see a big expansion in the atmosphere, which sees a big change in atmospheric drag. And as we get a congested, particularly LEO, constellation, particularly with all these mega constellations, we're going to need to have very accurate orbit prediction models, and really how we can bring space weather into that. We started a bit of work with UK Spock on that, but we'd love to develop that much further.
Brilliant, that's great to hear. Actually, Mark, space traffic management is a whole new dimension that we bring into the future aspects of space operations more than anything else. Chris, are there any future space collaborations you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I think we are in a really exciting time, especially in the SSA community, regarding the need to know, as Rayna rightly said, the need to know what's happening up there before we can really start making any sort of judgments about how to manage it, how to deal with it. We need to know what it is. So there's going to be a number of opportunities, I think, to collaborate on looking at governance models, but governance models dependent on evidence, dependent on data. I think there's going to be opportunities for collaboration pretty much across the piece when we're looking at the developments in on-orbit servicing as well. In terms of specific collaborations, obviously the culmination of the logins to find out just how we evidence fault, how we evidence causation in the orbital environment is going to be a really interesting sort of journey to go on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris. Rayna, I have a quick question for you, I think, which is quite relevant, and especially considering what happened recently with the press about the DART project. And this is from Mark Presley, about what sovereign capability would be sufficient for the UK to contribute and collaborate more widely, particularly on the international market. Great to hear your views on that.
So that's part of the pile of homework I've got now that the integrated review has kicked out. So the integrated review gave us, and then the work in the centre has given us some funding in some pipelines and some direction. What I'm now going through and working out is what is the strategy to the answers, and that encompasses everything from what are the specifics of the roles, tasks, missions of the SPOC and the requirements, all the way through to what capability have I got now? What do I need to own for the future? Who can I collaborate with to leverage some? And what is the stuff I might be able to buy in? So we're at early days of doing that and building out those strategies. If Mark's got any answers, delighted to hear, but we're on the start of a journey to unpack all of that. All I can say is that anything that we are doing, we consider with everything. It's if it meets our need, does it meet a broader cross-government need? Is it something that is that it would be helpful for collaboration more broadly? And then is there something there that is leveraging some excellent developed industry technology over?
Great, thank you very much for that, Rayna. And of course, you mentioned that key word there that we're all waiting with bated breath on, which is the strategy in industry and academia sense. That's obviously the national space strategy that hopefully will come out.
Yeah, so sorry to come back on that, but I don't know, because it's so both the national and the defence space strategies are in their final throes of being prepared for release. Obviously, we don't control the timelines on that. I would hope that we would see something in the coming few weeks, and I know it's been a long wait for everyone, us included, on that, but hoping to see something really quite over.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I thought before I close, if Will has actually managed to get his contact with us, we'll give him an opportunity to close the panel by just talking briefly about the Dstl collaborations. Unfortunately, no communications again. Well, so that we don't impact on the timings of the entire conference, I would like to thank the panel members for participating today. Your presentations were superb. Your engagement is great. I will send some any residue questions we have, I'll send directly to you, and hopefully we can answer them for those that remaining. And it just remains for me to say very much thank you very much for joining us in your participation in GNOSIS. And over to I think it's panel separate sessions now.